Listen-only mode.
Well, good morning, good afternoon to each of you who have joined our webinar today. We're very glad to have a substantial, large audience with us today across the country, across the U.S. and some folks from other places. And so welcome to our webinar. My name is Ian Margerson, and I'll be one of the hosts that will be taking you through a number of things in our webinar today. There are many folks online here, and some that are our customers and some that are folks we don't know. But if you are in the Office of Finance or related to analytics, and you have related needs in budgeting, planning, forecasting, predictive analytics, any number of these type of areas, then we're optimistic that we'll have some good content for you today. You hopefully all can see my screen, and the little cartoon that's on my starter page. This is something I just love as I work with many different customers and different folks. And some of you may feel you're in the same position, but you're ahead of the others because you're here for the webinar today, and you're probably very busy doing these functions. And so our goal today is really just to try and show you what perhaps might be a better way for doing some of these things. And so we're looking forward to taking you through it today. This webinar is one that, as you I think were notified of, is one that in which you can get and receive CPE credits for. And so I'm going to ask Susan to just open the poll for us here. And what we'd like to know is, for each of you who are on the webinar right now, would you like to receive the credit for this? We will issue you a certificate where you will get the credit for the webinar that you can use for your CPE accreditation. And so we're happy to provide that for you. Please answer the poll, give us a yes or a no if you'd like to receive that credit, and we will get that off to you. And I think most of you have answered that now. Susan, you can close that up. That's great. Thanks very much. Are folks seeing my next screen? The agenda screen should be coming up in a minute here. There we are. Very good. So over the next hour, we're just going to have a brief little introduction. Going to cover a few points on the business and finance challenges that perhaps you are facing, and some of the challenges that we seek to address with our customers, and particularly with planning analytics, as we're going to discuss today. Just like you had that poll for the CPE credit, we're going to have a few interactive questions. And interesting enough, that's actually one of the requirements for receiving the credit, is to respond to at least 3 interactive questions through the webinar. So we'll have those as we go through. We're going to give you an overview of IBM Planning Analytics, and then we're going to move into a demo. And we have Bob on the line with Clear Insight, and I'm going to be turning it over to Bob for the demo. While we are on this screen, I just want to highlight for you that you will see in your GoToWebinar panel there are links for questions and links for chat. You can either post your questions into the question section or into the chat section and send it to all the organizers, and we're going to leave some time at the end for Q&A. And so look forward to answering any of your questions. So as we're going through it, don't hesitate to just fire some questions into there. You can do it just to the organizers or to all, but then we'll follow up in the final 10 or 5 minutes at the end for questions. So please do put your questions in as you go forward. And actually, I wanted to mention as well, you will see there's a line in your GoToWebinar panel for handouts. And we provided 4 or 5 handouts there about ourselves, about Clear Insight. There's a brochure on planning analytics. There's a brochure there on Watson, one on Nucleus Research, a research company that has rated these that I thought might be interesting to you as well. So just a few housekeeping points for you there as we go through. So for those of you who may not be as familiar with who we are, Clear Insight, we are indeed a advanced IBM business partner, but First and foremost, we are a consulting firm to the Office of Finance for our clients across Canada, the US, and in the Caribbean as well. We really focus on the core being to help enhance and leverage the business capacity you have to drive better outcomes. So often in the Office of Finance, things, as I'm sure you will attest to, are perhaps done more inefficiently than you'd like to have that happen. Oftentimes we address that inefficiency by hiring more and more people to do manual tasks, and so you've got well-trained finance people, and they're spending all their time in Excel and doing different things like that. So what makes us happy and what we work with our customer in is leveraging the capacity that you have to deliver better business outcomes. First and foremost, it's around the planning, budgeting, and forecasting, and that's most of what we will be talking about in the webinar today. We also support very much in the close process with consolidation and financial reporting, and we will be running future webinars on that. There is a questionnaire at the end of this webinar, and you can just indicate there if you're interested in receiving notification when we run future webinars on some of these other topics. Number 3 there, management and performance reporting. This you will see some of within the context of this webinar as well, and how we help many in the Office of Finance and in operations with that. And then also profitability modeling, analytics, predictive analytics. We will be touching on a bit of that today, but we will be running another webinar down the road, especially for predictive modeling and capabilities as well. So these are kind of the areas we focus in on, the areas that get us excited about as we're helping our customers, from small and medium-sized customers right up to large multinational companies across many industries in the business. So as we think about the challenges in the Office of Finance, this slide really, and we're going to go through a number of deficits, 3 different deficits that we're seeking to address that you may be facing. And this first one is an insight deficit. And it comes in 2 different flavors. Often we're working with the Office of Finance, with the CFO, and your goal, your objective is to be more of a trusted advisor to the business, not to be just the group that is the bean counter and keeps track of the numbers and delivers the financial reports, but how can you be a better trusted advisor? How can you leverage the vast amounts of information that are no doubt available within your systems inside your firewall, and also market information outside your firewall, so that you can support the business, sales, operations, the executive team with better insights in the business. And all too often, many Office of Finance teams really feel that they fail in being able to deliver that insight. So that's the key thing there, is being able to do that. Now, part of the problem is you're not alone. There is so much data growing and available today, and you will all have heard of the just vast amounts of data that are growing in our world today, with all that is being collected, and much of that, I'm sure, within your own organization. There is so much data hiding below the surface that's not being tapped into. The objective, of course, is how can I make that data available to me, so that when I'm making my budgeting decisions, so that I'm doing my planning, so I'm trying to enhance the performance of my business, how can I access these vast amounts of data in an efficient and effective way, so that I can use that to drive further capability, whether you're finance, operations, marketing, or whatever area of the business that is. So one of our first little poll questions popping up here is as it relates to the area of business analytics and having access to the data. Susan's opened up that poll for you now. If you can just answer, where do you see yourselves in the area of having access to information and being able to leverage that information? From no insight deficit, you feel you have full access to that information and are acting to address all your opportunities and risks, down through to option number 4, where, you know, at the end of the day, you really feel like you're in insight distress and you can't get in, poor access to data, and it becomes very difficult. So just put in what you think is your best position of where you are. We will show you the answers just in a few seconds when we close up. We'll give you another 10 seconds or so to try and get your answer in there and answer that. And remember, just for the CPE credits, we need you to be able to answer these questions as well. So just give you another few seconds. All right, Susan, if you want to close that up. Okay, very good. Thanks for that, and thanks everybody for answering. So the majority of you fall within the middle section, and I would expect that. There are some that are at number 1, and that's fantastic. I'm not sure if you're a large company and that's the result, or a smaller company with access, but for those of you that are in the middle and lower down, we're hoping that we can help you, give you some ideas, give you some suggestions around addressing that. Okay, the next deficit is what we will refer to as an agility deficit. And really, agility is for you to be able to get timely insights, but to do it in a collaborative fashion and to work across the business and to be agile midway through the business when issues come up in the marketplace, things change. Do you feel that you're agile enough and operating as a single unity as a company to address those? And clearly, as per this slide, 75% of the companies do feel that they struggle with this, with a lot of them citing across all the business units. And a lot of that comes into play into how you do your planning and how you do your budgeting. And when that's done very independently from department to department, perhaps sending it into finance, and that's the only place where it's consolidated. So that is a key issue that we can help folks as they struggle with that. When we think about agility deficit, there's been many surveys done, and this is a survey, a CFO Insights survey study that was done by IBM, and they've been able to quantify the fact that those who do have access to business analytics and business foresight, especially when they're doing their budgeting and planning, do tend to be much more effective across the business in aligning the business in their budgets and plans. And I love this statement here that you see on the right from a CFO and insurance company. My objective is to move the finance from a state of transactional thinking to one of analytical thinking. And that really is exactly the space that we're talking about now. And really just to make sure we're all on the same page, you've got your ERP systems, you've got accounting systems, whether they're small or large, that handle all of your day-to-day task-based accounting, and those systems are great for that. What we're talking about here is more of a strategic repository, a single version of the truth that's going to sit beside those systems, that's going to take the actual information and live information from those systems and provide you and all of the business with a single repository covering your actuals, your budgets, your forecasts that allow you to do that transactional or that analytical thinking and strategic thinking. Back to our earlier point about helping making the Office of Finance really a strategic partner with insights for the business. So another quick little poll here. How do you feel about your budgeting and planning process? You can think about it in the context of just the challenges or effectiveness of it, or really think about it in the context of being a collaborative process that aligns the business so that your plans and budgets really become execution plans for the business, not just numbers that we all breathe a sigh of relief once we're done our budgets and they get tucked away on a shelf somewhere. Because really, in today's world, we want to be leveraging these plans being able to do rolling forecasts and do that across the business so that everybody is aligned in those plans and we're able and agile to adjust as the business changes. So I'll just give you another few seconds to punch your answers in there. All right, Susan, if you want to close that poll up, that would be great. And so there, all of you can see we're kind of aligned along the same answers as the previous question of where folks are at. And wouldn't it be nice to get to a more collaborative planning and process, but to be done in a way that's efficient and easy? The third deficit that we're just going to touch on here quickly is the technology deficit. And this is probably an area that's nearest and dearest to each of you on the call as you go through this. The tools that you're using to get it done. So the tools that you're using can impede and prevent achieving effectiveness in those other two deficits we talked about, and clearly can be the cause of inefficiency in your business. No surprise though, the vast majority here, we've got intuition and spreadsheet together there. You've got 66% of the people do their budgeting and planning with spreadsheets and with Excel, where finance is putting together your templates, sending them out, having folks fill them in and get them back. And I'm sure many of you are no strangers to that process and leveraging that. And it goes back to the tools I was just talking about. Some are using ERP, some do have analytical tools, but an analytical tool isn't necessarily the right tool for doing your budgeting and planning either, because it's all about being able to push your data back into the systems as well. So often using an ERP or an accounting system to do your budgets and plans from a strategic perspective is putting a square peg in a round hole. And so these are some of the challenges that we face. And as we look at Excel specifically, you will see on my screen here, we're not by any means intending to get rid of Excel, but there are challenges that we all face with it. We love them because we all know them, they're flexible, it's fast, there's not a huge IT component to have to leverage them, and so it gives us a level of independence to get things done. But in a corporate world where we're trying to integrate and consolidate across many people and complex budgets and plans, we clearly run into trouble. Things you can't do with spreadsheets that you can do with solutions like Planning Analytics. Clearly we are error prone, especially when our models are broken. Important things like workflow and audit trail as people are budgeting, and as an administrator in finance to see and know how far along people are in getting their budgets done, who sent them in, who hasn't sent them in. The security issues, so often your budgets are going to include HR, are going to include personal information, and it creates uneasiness if those kind of spreadsheets are getting emailed around the office. Even if there's a password on those, you've got security issues. And then things that you're going to see when Bob demos, like sandboxing and spreading type functions that allow you to do what-if analysis and play with your numbers and effectively spread your data in ways such as, I want to budget this by 5% over the trended actuals from last year and automatically have those numbers go in. Efficiencies that are in a solution designed for it that aren't necessarily in Excel. And then a lot of that comes back to the last point, is there's no central data store or auto consolidation. The numbers are in your Excel spreadsheets, whereas the important thing is to get that into a central data store. So especially you folks who are controlling this process from finance, when your department leaders put in their budgets, you can immediately see that and consolidate it and roll it up. And then as a result, using these other systems and reasons that you're keeping your eyes open for what alternatives do I have, is it is too much effort. You end up with multiple versions of the truth. I've been there. I've sat in the executive meetings in my past life in the corporate world, and everybody's looking at different versions of the truth, errors in my reports, and probably the biggest is just it's so time-consuming, and often that comes back to all I can do is my annual budget. I don't want to get into rolling forecasts and annual forecasts or reforecasting because it's just too time-consuming. So these are all areas that Excel gives us challenges. And so as we think about in the email that you had got that invited you to this webinar, there are old ways of doing it and there's a new way of doing it. And we've gone down this journey with many, many clients. And it's about, as you see this little graph, it's about first addressing that efficiency issue, helping you then to align and adapt across the organization, and then be able to get foresight on your information and really produce content and insights and analytics in a unified way across the business that can help drive the business, adapt to changes in the marketplace, and move forward. And with insight deficits and agility deficits and technology deficits, it becomes quite a challenge. So our last little poll here on the predictive side that you can't do with Excel but comes in, we'll just quickly ask you to think about predictive insights. Are you using any predictive technology? Is it there in your business? Is it something you're thinking about doing? And how important would predictive be? And it's really becoming something that's becoming mainstream and can be brought into the business quite effectively, and it is actually a component of the planning analytics solution. Maybe just another couple of seconds there. All right, Susan, let's close that up. And as you can see, and as we might have expected, there's a lot more on the lower scale with predictive. It's a newer world and something that we're excited to show you. And this is where planning analytics comes in. I'm watching the time. I want to turn it over to Bob very quickly, so I'm just going to buzz through a couple of little points here and then turn it over to Bob. So planning analytics is all about giving you speed, agility, and foresight to get these processes done. It's a cloud-based solution, a solution that quickly and easily builds your plans in this environment. Think of it like Excel, where Excel is a powerful solution and you build your templates in that. Within planning analytics, we're building your templates, and we can even build them in Excel in planning analytics to deliver your capabilities for you. So we're going to see planning analytics. It's about execution in your business as well. That one chart that I said you could download there shows here Nucleus Research has just in March actually looked at this whole space and said that planning analytics was the top of the pack because of all of these integrated capabilities and the fact that we can enable you, whether you're a small company or a large company, to provide this at a price that fits your budget. Planning analytics is a single interface you'll see as Bob logs in and shows you that gives you access to all of these points. It's something that allows you to have corporate plans on the left, the traditional approach, corporate templates, corporate reports that are built that is accessible to everybody, but very efficiently allows individual end users on the right here in this picture to build your own, to post them, and to make them shareable to the degree that their security and rights are there. So it becomes very much a powerful self-service environment without the dependence upon IT. It embraces Excel in the environment, and so Excel, you're going to see how you can use Excel. You can use mobile, and you've got interaction with collaboration. You've got the ability in the way that the data is stored to meet your business. We set up the hierarchies, and we set up the way you analyze the business with your data, the way that it fits so that it works in your environment and allows it to work for across all your businesses, sales, marketing, HR, IT, and operations, with the foresight and predictive capability in there that we can touch on a little later. where you're able to have the system analyze your information and your predictive capabilities. And last but not least, this solution includes Twitter data and weather data in the social analytics piece, so that when you're doing an analysis, you can actually get insight from the social media space on certain tags and certain things that would be important as you're doing your planning and your analytics, and that is part of it as well. So it's a consolidated environment, and I really need to turn this over now to Bob, and so that you can really see the solution, and hopefully you've got a bit of a background to it. So Bob, I'll turn it over to you now. Great, thanks Ian. So what I want to show folks today is Planning Analytics, and we'll have some time to touch on Watson if we keep going here. So I want to say this is the welcome screen. Everything starts. As I'm going through these screens here, please be sure to enter your questions into the chat, and I'll try to go through them as part of the Q&A at the end. In Planning Analytics, folders show up as tiles. So these are the tiles that we have available right now. If I go into one of the folders, these are the workbooks within that folder. So the model, it tries to follow the same kind of a view as you would have in a file system or in Excel that folks are used to. For today, we're playing the role of a regional manager responsible for the budgeting cycle and involved in sales and marketing. We're going to review some of our dashboards to see if anything catches our eye. We're going to find something we want to change and change it. And then just for fun, we're going to see how easy it is to set up a dashboard if we wanted to do so. So we look at we've got a smart code dashboard here. As things are organized into folders and workbooks, this is an example of one workbook with several tabs in it. And we've got scorecards and metrics here. So this is giving us our numbers on gross margin as well as some of our major expense items. We can do some cause and effect analysis. So this is telling us what is impacting our net profit. If we wanted to explore the different pieces, well, we can expand out our total operating expense. And everything here is live. So there's a lot of exploration and possibility here for folks to navigate to anything that catches their attention. And for goals, so here we can see how individual KPIs link into strategic plans at the very top, as well as you can see when I mouse over any one of these elements, I get some very specific items that tell me how certain areas are contributing or hurting this particular strategic goal. If we go into the revenue analysis, now we're looking at how are my sales numbers by quarter, which products are the majority of my sales, what channels are my biggest producers. If I wanted here I'm looking at volume by unit. So remember, this is not a report. This is something I can play with. So maybe I want to see my gross revenue. So I just click on gross revenue, and you'll see that the charts and graphs and grids all change to look at the different measures I'm looking at. Now I have some ideas for a promotion that we want to play with in a moment, but we'll come back to that after checking some of these other tabs. So let's look at the capital analysis. So here is capital. We can see, well, which assets have been requested as part of the next year's capital plan. How does that affect capital? What does the depreciation schedule look like? And some nice visuals to explain that. If we next look at our payroll analysis, we can see, well, for my department, what are my employee expenses? What merit increases should we get per person? What impact does a transfer have on my department? You can kind of see visually here that, oh, my FTEs are dropping in June. Well, what's happening? Well, I can see visually in the chart, but also I can see that Helen is transferring in June. So maybe I should get ready to hire someone in June, or how do I want to manage that? And then we go to our operating expense. Well, what is the seasonality of my operating expenses? We get to see seasonality charts here to give us some insight into when these expenses are going to happen. And also this is where we can touch on predictive. So everyone's probably used to seeing budget and actual, but we can have predictive models here that can tell us based on historical information, this is where the trend would be. This is what the expenses would be from, predicted from historical information. We can look at them just as they were in any other scenario. There's also nice visuals and sliders we can play with here. So here we're looking at total operating expenses. Maybe I want to zero in on payroll. Now here when I zero in on payroll, you see visually I see my drop, and that's related to Helen's transfer. So maybe I'm not looking specifically at my department, but I can see that drop in FTE, that signals to me that something's not right. And typically it's easy to see that kind of visual
rather than looking at grid numbers. So next we have our target analysis. So what are the targets for each of my regions? I'm looking at Massachusetts right now. Maybe I want to look at Florida. As we switch to Florida, you'll see how the animation shows us variances here. It's a nice transition, which is visually appealing, but it also gives you a little bit of insight to see when you're going from one region to another or one area to another, what are the differences. That animation actually helps you catch what are the major variances between those two groups. So I say, okay, well, overall payroll is a big difference here. I can see that just by the animation. And last but not least, workflow. So Ian touched on workflow and how we can control really the approval process through a budgeting cycle to give transparency to everyone at where the budget progress is at. So here I've got my total company broken up by my eastern region. I can see eastern region has Massachusetts, Maryland, and Georgia, and I could see Massachusetts, they're working on it, it's reserved, someone's working on that piece right now, but Maryland and Georgia, they haven't started yet. So I might want to reach out to them and just give them a little bit of a nudge to get things going. Now, that's all nice to see. This is the new way of planning here. You've got all these things at your fingertips and a lot of flexibility to change things. So all of this can be changed, so let's give that a shot. If I go into my revenue analysis here, I've got an idea for a promotion. So I want to say, I think that our certain type of phone, this 4G 32 gigabyte phone that we're selling, I think we can get more, we can put in a promotion to increase our sales there. Now here we're looking at our revenue, but really, our projections are always based on units, so I'll just flip over to my units. And I can see, well, right now we're projecting to sell 5,390 units in Q1, 6,145 in Q2. Now, I want to play with this for a bit, so I don't want my changes to be showing up in reports throughout the system yet. So this is where one of the features called sandboxing comes in quite handy. Along the top here, you'll see my base, which is what I'm looking at here. But I can create a sandbox for my 4G 32 gigabyte promo. Create my sandbox. So now when I create my sandbox, I can see that it's selected by default, and I can start making changes in here. So maybe for the 32 gig unit, let's say we can crank that up to 9,000. Now you'll see right away visually all these items are turning blue. So any numbers that is impacted are showing up in blue because to help me see what's really changed. Q1, Q3, Q4, they haven't changed, but Q2 and full year have changed for related elements. And you may have noticed that also my charts and graphs are adjusted as well. So given that change in my forecast, even though it's just in a sandbox, it's represented visually in all these other elements. Now another nice thing about TM1 is the spreading piece. So let's say I like round numbers. So rather than 13,000, let's say we want 16K. So I'll put in 16K. Now the tool is smart enough to know that 16K is 16,000. It's also smart enough to know that, well, I don't want to just spread it evenly. I want to bump up each of these individual elements proportionally, so the total is 16,000. To Ian's point earlier, there's a lot of other flexibility that the tool has to be very smart about how it's allocating numbers. You can do different allocations. You can reference prior periods, prior years, different scenarios. There's a ton of flexibility around this very simple idea of just spreading a number from a high level to elements below it. And if I want to go and look at my gross revenue, I can flip over and see my gross revenue. And even though I'm looking at a different measure, I can still see all the elements that have changed. Maybe I want to look back at my base. So I can just change back to my base sandbox, and I see these are the numbers that we originally started with. So we're going to try and go from 1.8 million in sales to almost just over 5 million in sales, which would be great. Now, if I want to commit this, I can do that. But before I do that, I do like round numbers. So let's go back to my sandbox. we're going to go to volume units. And so here for Q2, you know, it's about 480 there, you know, 290 for phones in total. Let's put that whole thing to 300. Sorry, let's make sure we're in volume by units. There we go. So phones, yeah, 40. So it's 45,000. Let's be optimistic and make it 50,000. So I just changed a very high-level number, and you see it did that same proportional spread to all the elements below it, even though there's several layers below. Updated all the charts around, and I can still look at my different elements to get the different to get whatever I want to report on. And these numbers are not available to anyone else just yet until I'm comfortable with it. And now that I'm comfortable with it, well, now I can commit them. So I can say my volume of units in this sandbox here, I want to commit that. So I can commit my data. Do I want to commit it? Yes, I do. So now when I look at my base, I see my base is what it should be from my what-if analysis there. And I didn't have to go into Excel. I was able to make changes here. All the changes were saved back. All the calculations were done in line. I didn't have to run any processes. It was just simple. The tool doesn't get in the way. I think that's something I find very powerful. And there's also a lot of controls around here. So if you want to control who can see what, there's a very flexible and robust security model to control who can see what, who can change different numbers. Maybe you only want certain folks to edit payroll information. That's totally fine. And also maybe you need some help discovering, well, what's the change you want to make. So we can actually, we're tied in with Watson to get that kind of detail. So here, if we go back to our screen here, Watson's available from the Explore and Predict button right here. So when I click on Explore and Predict, I end up coming into Watson. Now I'm just going to, in the interest of time, I'm going to show you a demonstration of what Watson can do with a different data set. But the data could really be anything because we're starting with just a set of data. So let's say we look at employee performance. When I click on a data set, now keep in mind this is just a set of data. It could be a CSV file with a bunch of data in it. There's been no updates or ETL or analysis of this so far. We just loaded it into Watson, and it's come up with some questions that we may want to ask. And this one I find interesting. What's the relationship between % salary hike and total working years by age? So just click on the question, and we can type our own question if we choose to. That's fine too. When that brings it up, Watson's going to select the visual that it thinks it most well represents and communicates that particular idea and its insights. So here we're looking at a bubble chart. Now, let's look at a couple of data points here. So along the bottom, we see folks in their 20s and also in their late 50s and 60s. You know, increasing their salary doesn't really seem to affect how long they're going to be at a particular company. And then certainly this is going to be different by company, but I think, you know, for companies that I've seen in the past, that, you know, that sounds generally accurate. And we look at the top of the chart too. So here we see folks. Okay, there's a group of at 36, at 40, 35, 42, 50. So you see towards the top of the chart, it looks like you're giving a salary hike to someone in their 30s and 40s. That does have a positive impact in keeping them at the company for a longer period of time. So this is an insight that Watson came up with and showing me in a nice visual that didn't take any effort. This is not a canned dashboard or report. This is something that Watson just tried to answer my question. So that's how Watson can dovetail really nicely into any kind of planning that you're doing to help you surface some of the insights that you may want to be actioning upon. So we've looked at the new way to plan. We've looked at our 32 gig promo. Now I want to look at how easy it is to put together a dashboard. So let's say we want to have a new dashboard. Now we don't have to. It's purely our own choice if we want to do that or not. We can just, you know, make changes to the items that are already available. But maybe we want to put together analysis that we haven't seen before. So I can go into Excel, And when I connect into IBM Cognos, I can open up things I have available. Let's say I pick an existing income statement, and these are just Excel files. So these may look nice and fancy when I open them, but keep in mind these are just Excel files. They could be the same Excel files you're working with today. And just to show that they're, this is actually happening on the fly here, I'm just going to make this bold. So nothing all that fancy. I've got a report that I want to put together. I could add rows, I could change formatting, I do whatever I want. But I'm just going to make a quick change to this, and I'm going to publish this up. So I'll put it in the same folder. Let's just call it Income Statement 2. Publish that up. I don't even need to save this in Excel. So I can just close Excel. Don't need to save it because it's already saved on the server. Now, when it saves it on the server, I need to make it public. So I'm just going to do that. What making it public means is it's the security model needs to make sure that folks are only allowed to see the items for which they have access to. So once I make something public, then it's available. I've just made that public now. If I go into my work welcome screen again, I can create a brand new workbook. This is a nice blank canvas. It shows me any of the data I have access to. I go into where I saved that particular file. Here's our statement, Income Statement 2. When I open that one up, I just drag it onto the canvas. Planning Analytics is bringing that up for me, and this is now just an object on a canvas where I can kind of drag and drop it, resize it, and play with it how I choose. So I can make it a little bit bigger. I see that it's got my bold for Q2, so it does exactly what I expected, and then I can save it. So I want to save it as a personal one. Let's call it Q2 sample. And then if I go back to my welcome screen, go to my personal content, there's my Q2 sample. It's a new book, and there it is. So this is something that if I wanted to, I could share this with anyone in the company right now, and all of these are live. So it's not just a report it's not just a static report. It's captured and included all of the flexibility that it had as a report in Cafe and Excel. So I can change years and scenarios and regions. It also respects the same security model. So the security that's been set up, folks are only allowed to see what they have access to, and they're only allowed to change what they're given permission to do so. So now, going back to our welcome screen, let's go back to SmartCo again. Okay. So here we are, we're back at the revenue analysis. We've made changes to our 32 gig item here. That's our volume of units. We can also look at other measures that are here as well. So unit net price, total cost of goods sold, gross margin percent. We also have the flexibility to look at it by channel. So maybe I want to look at let's look at volume units by retail. Sorry, let's go back to this one for a moment. There we go. So we've got our base numbers that we can look at. Let's go back to the Watson piece here. Okay, maybe having a connectivity issue here. I'm happy to say I got through what I wanted to show everyone, but so we looked at the new way of planning. So you can see, you saw all the different pieces of planning analytics and how it looks in a particular, you saw all the different pieces of planning analytics and how we can look at different areas of the business. We also looked at how Watson Analytics ties into these different things. And I think now would be a good time to switch over to the Q&A.
Okay, Bob, thanks very much. And hopefully everybody's seeing my screen again. Oh, I wanted. Let's go down. And just before we go to Q&A, I thought I would just kind of wrap this up a little bit for context for each of you. And I went through this, I barely went through this slide. It was quite quick before. But what we're talking about here is an integrated system with the capabilities that Bob showed you, where the information, those cubes in the center of this little diagram, are the data that sits where we're going to take data from your ERPs, your accounting systems, and we're going to load that data into the cube dynamically or overnight, so that you always have your actuals in there. But then that's where, through the interfaces that Bob showed you, we didn't show you the mobile interface, that's there as well. The same thing, being able to add your budget. So your folks around the business can add budgets, update plans, do reforecasts, and it's all saved back into those cubes where you are then doing your analytics. And people have self-service analytics, plus the ability of people who you may not want to have access to the system being able to generate reports and send those out to people for information. You've got that Excel interface that Bob just briefly showed you as well, the predictive capabilities of Watson, the report production, and it's all wrapped together where everybody's doing their plans together and you're following it through that workflow. And the exciting thing for us is this is a solution that can excel and grow to the largest of enterprises, but can be packaged and priced for some of you who might be running your own accounting firms, some of you who are in smaller firms, and this can fit your need as well. So if we've touched on any nerves of issues where you are looking for improvement in any of these areas, we would love to share and help you with that. So I'm happy to open it up for questions. If anybody has put any questions in, please feel free to just type it in the chat. And I don't believe there is any questions here at this time. We'll just give you a minute there. If something comes up afterwards, this is my contact information, plus you've got the emails from us. Please don't hesitate to reach out. Happy to share additional insights with you if you're curious on what might be involved from a timing or a pricing perspective to be able to leverage this in your environment. Happy to answer all those questions and to make that happen. Susan, is there any questions that are in now?
Yes, we do have a question. And the question is, what are some of the other approaches to planning available? The one you showed doesn't really fit for me.
Good question. So I'm just going to take presenter back so I can show you some other options that folks have here. So along with planning analytics, there's these blueprints. So blueprints are best practices that have come from industry and come from a long experience of IBM implementing planning solutions across different companies and different countries, with different complexity. So these blueprints they've made available as starting kits for planning analytics. So if what I showed doesn't necessarily fit your particular business, there's other ones available. In fact, there's probably ones more specific to your industry or your area that would fit what you're looking for more accurately. So here's one I have brought up here. So this is just, it's still got a scorecard. We can look at sales and inventory and production. Now there's still we still want to go through and see how does it apply to your particular company, but we don't have to start from scratch. So we can start from a one of these viewpoints that are already available, and we get to use that as our starting point. So for each of these blueprints that are available, they've come with them the best practices. They also come with instructions and help to implement them. So you'll see the ones we're looking at here, there's instructions along the side describing what we're looking at and how it can be used. So typically, a lot of companies do allocations. So how do you want to allocate sales and marketing and finance expenses to different revenue generators or different areas of the organization? So doing allocations, even post-allocation profit calculations or reporting. You can do that even with visuals. So all this is already available as just one of the blueprints that we have inside Planning Analytics. It even goes so far as to have cash flow analysis. So cash flow is something that can be tricky for folks to figure out, but there's a lot of these blueprints have gone to the point of figuring out how to predict and manage cash flow. So in this one workbook, we've got scorecards, we've got sales, numbers we can look at. We can also adjust. And remember, these are not hard numbers. These are not read-only numbers. These are numbers we can adjust in forecasting to make sure that when we are forecasting towards the end of the year, we're using our current viewpoint of what we think is going on to give a very accurate, realistic view on what we think is going to happen. So I hope that answers your question.
Thank you, Bob. The other question is, how do I get my data into Planning Analytics?
Great question. So Planning Analytics has a couple different ways of getting data in, depending on how things are set up, or how you'd like things to be set up, I should say. You can set up data connections to data sources you may have available. You can also just have it free form, so folks are entering data through the tool, and you can also import data, typically CSV files or Excel files that are loaded into the tool. The import and the connectivity is quite powerful. I know Watts Analytics in particular has a secure gateway component that IBM's developed specifically for these tools, that if you have databases that you want to have plugging into this tool, with the secure gateway, you can be confident that your data is secure as it's being accessed by this tool, even though it's a cloud system. And if folks would like more detail on the security aspect of that, then I'm more than happy to go through that and follow up somewhere. But yeah, they put a lot of effort into making sure everything is secure and accessible.
So just a follow-up.
Oh, go ahead.
Just a follow-up to that question, can it access my GL data?
It should be able to access your GL data. There are some gotchas, so it depends on which GL system you're using, which database it sits on, whether you have the licensing appropriate to make that GL data accessible. Sometimes GL or ERP systems require certain licensing structures on the ERP side so that folks are allowed to pull that data.
Okay, Ian, I
don't think... Any more?
No more questions at this time.
All right. Okay, excellent. So appreciate those questions. And they're good. Those are excellent questions because as many people see something like Bob showed you, and you look at that, you say, well, that's not the way I budget or the way I do things. And that's really back to my earlier statement. If you think of Excel and you think of, well, you see an Excel template, and you say, well, I don't do it that way. Well, because you know Excel, that you can make the template look any way you want and configure it any way you want. And think of planning analytics the exact same way. This is not here's a canned way of doing budgeting. You pull it off the shelf and you have to do it that way. these templates, we make the templates any way you want to meet the way you do your budgeting and planning, and we set up the cubes to support your business process with your hierarchies and the way that you do things. So it's very important to see that, and what we wanted to be able to show you, as Bob did with Excel, you actually can use Excel to build your templates and the way you budget. And what often is the case, many of you are already using Excel, we can take your existing budget processes and leverage them as is or enhance them because of the capabilities in planning analytics and bring those into the system. But now you're holding your data in a secure way. You're leveraging the capabilities and you're crossing other businesses and other departments, so you're doing it collaboratively. So I hope that you have enjoyed spending the time with us, that you've learned a good bit about planning analytics and some new capabilities that might be able to enhance the way you're doing things. And we are more than happy to connect with any of you. You may have only been one or two of you from your business. If you have others that maybe you want to see it, just let me know. We're happy to set up a private webinar for you, or kind of talk about some of your challenges and see if this might be a fit from a capability and or a budget perspective for you, and happy to answer any and all questions. So thank you very much for your time, and if there are no more questions, we will say adieu, and we would remind you you're going to get a little survey after you log out. Please answer the survey. Please let us know if you're interested in being contacted, should we run one on the consolidation process, on the financial planning processes, and or more specifics on the predictive analytics. And so we're happy to let you know when those happen. And again, feel free to download any of those handouts in the handout side of your chart before you go as well. So thank you very much. We'll just leave the webinar open for a minute so that you can pull some of that down or jot down contact information, and then we will close it out. Have a great day to each of you, and look forward to touching base with you in the future. Bye for now.